There are mutterings of dissatisfaction among European leaders over the trade deal struck between the presidents of the United States and the European Commission. French ministers have called it unbalanced, while Hungary's Viktor Orban said Donald Trump ate Ursula von der Leyen for breakfast. But the EU's top negotiator has defended the trade agreement, calling it the best deal under very difficult circumstances. Correspondents say that in order to have struck this deal, the EU has pledged to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in the United States, buy a lot of military hardware, and buy hundreds of billions of dollars worth of energy from the US over the next 3 years. They say there is a lot more upside for America than there is for Europe in this deal, but it does allow Europe to avoid even steeper tariffs and, crucially, stops a trade war escalating between the two, because the EU had retaliatory tariffs ready to go.
So we have good news. We've reached a deal. It's a good deal for everybody, I believe. And I think you were saying this is probably the biggest deal ever reached in any capacity, trade or beyond trade.
It is.
We have stabilized on a single 15% tariff rate for the vast majority of EU exports. This rate applies across most sectors, including cars, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals. This 15% is a clear ceiling, so no stacking, all inclusive. So it gives much needed clarity for our citizens and businesses, and this is absolutely crucial. 15% is not to be underestimated, but it is the best we could get.
Ursula von der Leyen, and before her Donald Trump. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line from Manchester by the UK-based international business analyst Michael Potter. Michael, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and I do apologise for yesterday. Actually, this story is a day old. We're going to have you on yesterday, but we were unceremoniously biffed off the air by a live broadcast. So thank you for obliging us and returning to talk about this very important development with us. So the world's biggest economy, the US, shaking hands with the world's biggest trading bloc, the EU. But the deal hashed in Scotland still leaves the EU with a top-line figure of 15% tariffs, less than had been threatened, but still hefty, isn't it?
Yeah, good evening, Charles. Yes, an historic deal was made on Sunday at Donald Trump's golf complex at Turnberry, after months of negotiations between the EU and the US trade negotiators. You know, this has been going on for months and months, and finally a deal was struck. But is it a good deal? Is it a good deal for the US, or is it a good deal for the EU? Well, the US and, as we know, the US and EU have agreed a trade deal, after months of standoffs and the threat of a 30% tariff deal, they've agreed a 15% tariff deal on all EU goods, which is a good thing for the European Union. It gives them stability moving forward, and they have a playing field now of 15%. This is, it's half the 30% that Trump threatened to implement, and this will take effect immediately, more or less, on the 1st of August, which is this coming Friday. So the deal is set in stone, and it's due to commence on the 1st of August. However, the 27-member bloc would open its markets to US exporters with 0% tariffs on certain products, which is a good thing for the US. Von der Leyen has said it would bring stability for both of the allies, the EU and the US. And it would stave off a global trade war. And this is what both leaders wanted. They didn't want a global trade war. On the other hand, France European Affairs Minister Benjamin Haddad has said, well, it had some merits, such as exemptions on spirits, but it's a little bit unbalanced. As a result of this, recently the euro has fallen against the dollar. So that's having an interesting effect on this tariff deal.
Well, I mean, to be entirely fair, the Europeans aren't sort of, I think it was Trump who said it was a great deal. The Europeans don't see it that way. Their responses have actually been pretty dusty. I mean, their conclusion basically is that Trump won and the EU lost. But you're saying that it's not that simple, that arguably if everyone was, I mean, that most people, everyone probably lost, because analysts say it'll put up prices for American consumers, it'll stoke inflation, and it'll cause a drop in US GDP.
Yeah, I mean, that is a likely effect of these tariffs. However, Trump always, he's a winner and he likes to win. He likes to do deals, but he likes to be coming out on top of the deals. But he did say that the EU would boost its investment in the US. And if I can give you some figures, 600 billion investment, including military equipment, and on energy, 750 billion. Gas, oil and nuclear investment. So, some good things are happening. Some of the goods that are not attracting tariffs are aircrafts, for example, and the parts for aircraft. Chemicals are not affecting tariffs, and agricultural products are not affecting tariffs. However, saying that, there's 50% tariffs on steel and aluminium being exported into the US. So high tariffs on steel and aluminium. The European leaders, as you mentioned to Charles, cautiously welcome this deal. For example, the Irish Trade Minister reckons it's going to be more expensive and challenging for the Irish market. The Germany leader, Mr. Merz, said a trade conflict would have hit Germany hard. So he was glad that, in fact, a 15% deal was agreed rather than a 30% deal. And now we've not got a trade conflict. We've got a settlement, which is good to move forward. So what's coming out of it is there is stability and it's predictable now, trade relations, and it's going to support everyone and benefit everyone, hopefully. Italy, however, have welcomed the deal, but they need to look at it in more detail. And so we're getting different comments from different countries across Europe. Some are satisfied a deal has been done, others are a little bit more sceptical.
And that is precisely the problem, as you pointed out there, Michael, because you've got so many different countries inside that EU bloc. I mean, watching all this with your vast experience of how business works in the EU, a union that has, as you said, considerable muscle as the world's largest trading bloc. I mean, do you see this deal as possibly exacerbating tensions between EU member states and that EU sort of common trade policy becoming more fragmented?
Yeah, the problem with this, Charles, is, as you know, they have 27 member states in the EU, and sometimes it's very difficult to get agreement for all 27 member states, not just on trade, but on defence, on all sorts of other issues. So the problem is, and there is a meeting on Monday from the 27 ambassadors from all the EU states to discuss this deal in more detail. We've had some countries like Hungary, some countries like France, some countries like Italy not being happy with the deal. Some of the countries, we've not even had any feedback from them. So clearly, what's been agreed is a framework. There's still a lot of negotiations to be done and agreed in-house between the 27 EU countries. It's never an easy ride. For example, but the US-EU tariff deal, Trump sees it as a big win, but it's not a total defeat for Brussels, Charles. I don't think it's a total defeat for Brussels. Trump commented that it's going to bring the EU and the US closer together. And von der Leyen said it's a huge deal after very tough negotiations, which have been going on for months. We have now a framework agreement, and it's only a framework agreement. The technical details need to be negotiated over the coming weeks and months. And so this will continue, and it will start with this meeting on Monday in Brussels, where all the 27 EU ambassadors will meet. The Commission has a mandate to negotiate deals for the entire bloc. This is the challenge. but you can't always satisfy everyone. And still, this deal needs approval from all the member states. So, be interesting to see what happens on Monday.
Indeed, but I mean, there is something to be said about this trade deal being about rebalancing. I don't know if you made that point earlier, but Ursula von der Leyen certainly did, because that has been Donald Trump's obsession, that the EU sells much more into the US than the US sells into the EU. I mean, do you see this deal as kind of correcting that?
I think there's an element of balance there, Charles. You know, even if you look at defence, Trump has been asking the NATO, for example, to increase its contribution to a 5% spend from a 3% spend. And so, you know, these negotiations have been going on. The problem is, though, this could well affect the US. It could put prices up for US consumers. For example, buying a car from the European Union now, with the tariffs added onto it, is going to push it up to an average of $50,000 per new car. And this is a big increase that the American consumer will have to take into account when purchasing vehicles. And 15% tariff on the US will have its effect, as you alluded to earlier. The current rate of inflation in the US is currently standing at 2.67%. That's up from 2.35% last month. So already there's been an increase in inflation. The GDP for the US last year was at 2.9%, but it's dropped already to 2.8% in 2024. So again, a slight decrease in the US markets there. So the US consumers are likely to bear the brunt of all these tariffs, as companies will undoubtedly pass on increased prices.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much indeed. I mean, you made the point that, there is the redeeming qualities out of this is that there is some stability, there is a measure of predictability. That's the kind of thing that businesses crave. And I want to thank you very much indeed, and for your patience and coming to explain all this to us. So Michael Potter is the UK-based international business analyst who was talking to me on the line there from Manchester.